Beauty. Beauty is not just on the surface, and at times can be found deep inside and sometimes even within. Or in the case of today's watch, all you have to do is turn it over. Hello, my name is Martin, and I have a lust for watches. I have the pleasure of speaking to you today about a watch from Sugess, the 1963 watch Pilot Air Force. Bit of an awkward name, I have to admit. If I had to rebrand the watch myself, I would rather call it Silky Milky or just drop the watch part and call it Pilot Air Force. Generic, I know, but a little bit more concise. When I first saw this timepiece, I was instantly drawn in and intrigued by its specs. And while I'm not typically a fan of pilot-style watches and lean more towards divers and dress watches, I felt inclined to give this a try due to the exceptional pricing. The standout features of this watch are the enamel dial, the blue hands, and the ST1901, a hand-wound 30-minute chronograph movement. Before we actually dig into the watch itself, let's first discuss the history behind the movement. During the 1960s in Switzerland, there were three main chronograph manufacturers: Lemania, Valjoux, and Venus. Lemania, named for Lake Geneva, founded in 1884 by Alfred Lugren, was primarily involved in the watch industry as movement makers and joined hands with Omega and Tissot in 1932 during the Great Depression. Now it is owned by the Swatch Group and has been put at the center of manufacturing for Breguet. Valjoux, founded by brothers John and Charles Raymond in 1901, now belongs to the Swatch Group as well, no surprise, and falls under their ETA division. They are most famous for the Valjoux 7750 movement, also known as ETA 7750, and is used by many brands like Breitling, Tag Heuer, Tissot, Longines, Young Hans, and Oris. In 1966, they are also known to have absorbed the company we are most interested in today, Venus. Venus was a very well-known movement company during the 1920s, and one of the first to create a chronograph movement with a column wheel to control the central chronograph hand. As costs of manufacturing column wheel-based movements began to rise, Venus needed an injection of cash to come up with research and development funds for newer movements. Looking for funds, the company tried to sell their Caliber 175, a popular column wheel chronograph movement at the time, and their first target was the Soviet Union. But they had already been copying Venus's Caliber 150 and were not interested. With the Soviet Union's rejection, Venus turned their sights toward China, who were more than happy to pay for the blueprints and all the machinery involved in making the Caliber 175. The Chinese government until this time was dependent on the Swiss and the Soviet Union to source watches for their military personnel. However, this would no longer be the case with the acquisition of Venus chronograph movement. In 1955, by order of the Chinese government, codenamed Project 304 was initialized. The Chinese set out to provide a Chinese-made watch for their military forces. The company behind this project would be the Tianjin Watch Factory, at the time known as the Wu Yi Watch Factory, but renaming itself after relocating to Tianjin in 1962. Starting with only 4 craftsmen, it would eventually become the Tianjin Seagull Watch Group in 1992. In 1965, the production of the ST5 movement was the first ever to be designed and produced wholly inside of mainland China, and they would continue development into the modern day with offerings that contain complications such as tourbillons and repeaters. Inside the case of today's watch, we have the ST1901, a direct descendant from not only a half-century of development and manufacturing within China, but also another half-century of Swiss horology. As for the watch company, Sugess themselves are based in Kwun Tong, Hong Kong, and have been established since 2010. They offer a variety of timepieces along with the aforementioned Seagull movement, and also package their watches around Miyota and Seiko movements. It's not a brand with a rich history like some bigger players in the industry, but the company itself separates itself from other manufacturers by providing watches at a slightly more premium level than its peers. The watch has two options, black leather or blue leather strap. It makes it easy to pick. I personally went with blue to match the faux blue hands, but also because I actually don't own very many blue straps, and thought I would use it for a different watch, but I've just kept it on the watch and have never swapped it out. The cost of the watch is about 200 US dollars, depending on whether or not you grab it while it's on sale or if there are any valid coupons. As for the dimensions, the watch measures 40 millimeters wide, 20 millimeter lug width, 49 millimeter wingspan, and 13.5 millimeters in depth. The crown is 6.5 millimeters wide and comes out about 4 millimeters from the case. The watch weighs 70 grams and is light on the wrist and has a water resistance rating of 5 ATM. The watch sports a milky enamel dial and features two rail-track subdials. The 9 o'clock subdial provides a running seconds hand, and the 3 o'clock subdial tracks the chronograph minutes up to half an hour. The hour markers are aesthetically pleasing and are typical field watches coming from World War I. The brand Sugess is printed along the top, and on the bottom it states mechanical chronograph. I do find the font type to be particularly wise as it exudes a classic and timeless vibe. It isn't comical nor too out of character for itself. There is a slightly curved sapphire crystal which I cannot ascertain whether or not there's much AR coding applied to it. However, it is legible and never really bothered me in my daily usage. The enameled finish isn't particularly noticeable when the watch is by itself, but when I compare it to other white dials I have, it does pop as it has a very slight translucent quality to it that creates depth within the dial as light seeps in. Also, it isn't just pure white either, it does have a very soft milky quality to it that makes me thirsty for the dairy. Ooh. A pair of cathedral hands adorn the watch face and are finished in blue. I can't verify whether or not it's actually heat treated, but I assume that they are chemically treated, as I can't imagine actually thermally produced blued elements at this price bracket. As is typical with military and railroad inspired watches, seeing cathedral hands isn't unexpected. And what else was unexpected is the quality of finish on these hands. They are superbly done and pop just right when the light hits it to produce a flash of blue zing, but other times they lay subtly in the darker tonal ranges, waiting for their time to shine. Both subdials also have the same finished hands, and since there's no paintwork done on the hands, there's very little to show any poor workmanship, and the edges all appear to be very clean. Lume is found on all hour markers and both the hour and minute hand. Unfortunately, there's no lume on the seconds hand and any of the subdials. The lume is decent, however it does fade quickly and doesn't really stay around long enough. Still legible even throughout the night, just not as bright as more expensive offerings. The case is simple and is polished all around. There aren't any bevels to really speak of, but the edges are all well done and smooth to a point, where in hand it feels soft and quite enjoyable to hold. Feels a lot like a smooth rock with its oval shaping. The crown is signed with a 5-pointed star and is laid upon a sandblasted finish. When winding the watch, there is no real audible noise other than some soft clicking. Instead, you can feel it when you are getting close to having wound the watch to its limit. You should stop there and not force it unless you want to overwind the mainspring and risk snapping it. There are two pushers, one for starting and stopping the chronograph, and the other for resetting it. Both have polished heads and are not decorated. The pushers feel solid and aren't mushy. There is 1.5 millimeters of travel before the pushers actually actuate. anything, and when it does, it feels oddly satisfying. They engage well, and I enjoy just fiddling with the pushes from time to time, just to see the chrono hands snap back to 12 o'clock. On the back of the case is a exhibition sapphire crystal, which allows you to take a look at the movement inside. As we had discussed in our brief history lesson today, the movement inside is a ST1901 by Seagull. Comes equipped with 29 joules and beats at a 21,600 beat rate, approximately 40 hours of power reserve. The power reserve does go down to about 35 hours if the chronograph is kept running. It is hand winding and has no hacking, so if you're into syncing your watches, then it will prove to be difficult. It is a column wheel chronograph, which traditionally has been a more expensive option than a cam-operated chronograph. The specific movement inside this watch has a swan neck regulator and will be useful to an actual watchmaker that's interested in regulating the watch. Instead of pushing the regulator to push it towards positive or negative, you either tighten or loosen the screw that's holding the swan neck, which is using resistance energy to hold the regulator in place. The easiest way to explain this would be, instead of making adjustments with a tool that only goes in increments of 10, you can instead make adjustments with a tool that does increments of 1. There is some Geneva striping on the movement, which is nice to see. Though it's not executed very precisely, it's still a nice addition and adds a bit of variety. There is also some prolonging, though it's only visible behind the mainspring. Like the striping, it also isn't very well executed, however, it is there and makes the movement a pleasure to look over. All the screws have the same blue finish like the hands and complement the gold-toned cogs handsomely. The strap that comes with the watch is higher in quality than I had anticipated. I was fully expecting to swap it out, but instead I've simply left it on and used it all this time. It is padded, made of leather, and has 2 strap keepers, with the one keeper closest to the buckle held in place as is typical. There is a bit of tapering going on from 20 millimeters at the lugs to 18 millimeters at the strap ends. It is fairly water resistant. I wouldn't suggest going swimming or jello diving with it, but it does ward off light splashes and seems to have held up very well, irrelevant of the abuse it's gotten. With quick release equipped, it's also easy to take on and off as needed. Some strong points of the watch are the dial, the movement, and the chronograph complication. Creamy, milky dial with blue hands. A classic pairing seen across many well-known brands, most notably Cartier, which fully embraced this design language and have rested upon its laurels for all time. Unlike Cartier though, Sugess takes it up a notch and graces the dial with lumed hands and markers, and something about the combination of the yellowed white lume, milky dial, and blued hands all work in unison to create some wonderful visual harmonies. Some may tell you that because it's made in China, it's got to be a POS when it comes to watches. Surely, just like any other country, there are a variety of goods that each country manufactures. And just because you're a slave to globalization and have gotten used to seeing cheap Chinese goods, doesn't mean that everything from China has got to be at the same level. You have to remember that not only have the Chinese adopted their watchmaking from the Swiss, but have also put their own hard work from the adoption to advance it to where it is now. Much like how the Swiss had adopted many of its watch practices and actual watchmakers from the areas of Great Britain and France. The Seagull is not going to be the same quality as Vacheron or Patek, but it's at a price range that is more accessible, and the best watch is the one on your wrist, not behind a showcase gate-kept by financial barriers. The movement is attractive, and being a hand-wound movement, there is no rotor to get in the way of seeing the movement in its glory. It's especially cool to see the actual gears and levers move when you are using the chronograph. Normally, I stayed away from chronograph complications as I thought they are pretty useless. Usually you have to go through at least 2 to 3 steps before actually engaging the timer, and I'd always rationalize that if that's the case, I might as well take my phone out and use the same number of steps to start a timer. No one wants to undo a screw lock, then turn one crown or pull it out one position, then actually push the start button, at which point the race has already finished. However, as I've used the chronograph on this watch, I've come to appreciate the simplicity of having a timer on your wrist that engages with a simple push of a button. I've used the complication on my bike where I couldn't be bothered to pull over and get my phone out of my bag or try to get it out of my pocket. Instead, I can reach over with one push, I can start the timer. Even trying to get a set of planks done at 1 minute intervals, it's much easier to just use this watch instead of using a phone. In the same vein, having a 30-minute timer has also been a bit of a blessing in disguise. Before I started to use the watch, I was thinking how useless is it to have a 30-minute timer? I mean, if not 30, why not 60 or even timing it into the hours? Turns out that my attention falls off around 30 minutes anyways. In the cases that I do use the chronograph, I end up timing things that are only about 5 to 10 minutes at most. Soft-boiled eggs, 5 to 6 minutes. Hard-boiled eggs, 8 to 10 minutes. Pressed coffee brew, 5 to 7 minutes. Watching porn. Well, you get the idea. I've not really wanted to time anything past 30 minutes exactly to the minute and second, and should I want to, the elapsed time for those events are long enough that it's easy to just look at the actual time and do the math. No matter how great a watch is, there's always something that isn't right, and I'll keep this as concise as I can. First, the edges of the hour markers. I'm not sure who was responsible for this, but I feel like they shouldn't have hired one-fingered Uncle Lee or blind Auntie Chan. Looks like whoever did the hour edges was high on acid and tripping out because I can't see one straight edge. I'm Asian, by the way. Next, I wish they had put even a dot of lume on the second hand. As a pilot watch, there's really no need to do so, but it just feels a bit barren without any lume, especially when it was applied elsewhere. The watch does wear thick. The exhibition case bag, though really nice to look through, is not helping the fight against thick. Coupled with a domed sapphire crystal on the front, the watch could easily have lost 2 to 3 millimeters of thickness if it wasn't for the glassware. Next, there's no originality behind it, and the watch is a mishmash of old vintage timepieces, which has also been copied by almost every other watch company at one point or another, so I can't really blame them. Sadly, macros do not lie. There's visible flecks of dust and small threads over the hour markers, and in the movement as well. I could get over the face being covered in gunk to a point, but why the backside? Movements should be made in a hermetically sealed room where each person walking inside needs to be blasted by a wind tunnel so hard that they can't move a single muscle. It looks like Seagull forgot to turn on the wind tunnel altogether. There's really no excuse for the movement to have so much extra baggage. Lastly, it's a cost-effective measure, but the movement has a spacer ring made of plastic. This makes my insides hurt. So would I ever repeat this purchase? If I lost the watch or had to get it repaired, I think I would buy not the exact same watch, but a different version from Sugess or any other watch company that houses the ST1901 movement. It isn't because I don't like the watch, but with such a variety of offerings out there, I would like to try a different flavor or packaging around the ST19 and its series of chronograph movements, especially ST1905, ST1906 with decentral power reserve, or ST1907 with central power reserve indicator, and possibly ST1908 with a date and real moon phase if I can ever find one. Overall, a fantastic watch, and one that I've been pleasantly surprised with. I do find myself reaching for this gem more often than I like to admit over other watches that far outweigh it in dollar value. Also, the ritual of checking and winding the little sucker is rather enjoyable and doesn't feel like a chore as I originally thought I would. I do not own any other manual winders, and this watch has opened the doors to possibly more manually wound acquisitions in the far future. With the great movement inside that makes both the front and the back of the watch beautiful to look at no matter what time of day or light levels, I can't help but lament that the lume is so weak. And as a person that wears a watch to bed and being blind as a bat, I have to rely on the old faithful wristwatch to gauge how much longer I can stay in bed before the overlord comes banging. Thank you for watching to the end, and let me know in the comments what you think of the watch. If you like this video and would like to see more, you know what to do. Until next time, keep it real. Bye bye.